Okay.
Okay, can you see the question paper?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So have you ever done economics before?
No, I've never. I'm a science student.
All right, it's fine. So we'll start, maybe let's just give a background of what economics is all about, right?
Okay.
So in answering this question, right, you are attending to what they call managerial economics, right? But in addition to managerial economics, there are other fields of economics that you can also study, right? There's what we call microeconomics, and there's what we call macroeconomics. So those are the two major fields of economics. Understand? So managerial economics now, basically you are taking the concepts that you have understood under micro and under macroeconomics, and then applying them to an organization or to a case study scenario as a manager. So it's like high-level economics where you're just applying the concepts and are not worried about the principles. But you definitely need to have an understanding of the principles of economics for you to be able to answer these specific questions. Because without the understanding of those principles of economics, it will be difficult for you to understand what exactly they want you to apply. So you might end up having very low marks because you would have answered the questions, but you would not have applied the principles of what? The principles of economics. Yes. So when you are looking at the two major areas of economics, right? The first area, like I said, it's microeconomics. This is low-level economics. This is the starting point of economics. Under microeconomics, you are studying what we call individual decision-making processes, i.e., what are the theories that are that underlie the economics that we want to study. For example, when you're studying economics, we say that you are studying the relationship that exists between the unlimited nature of human wants and the limited nature of the resources that are available. So therefore, because resources are what are limited, and when we're saying resources in economics, we refer to four things. We refer to land, we refer to labor, we refer to entrepreneurial skills, and we refer to capital. That is what we refer to when we're saying resources. And land includes everything. You know, your sea, your actual land, your trees, your gold, all of those things are part of what is called land. And then the other ones, I think they are self-explanatory. So we're saying that because the resources are limited in nature, and because we as people have unlimited ones, we therefore have to make choices, right, in our day-to-day decision-making processes. So economics is now about the study of how we make those choices, right? And the choices that we're making, we are going to answer what we call the three problems of economics, right? The problems are what should be produced, how should it be produced, and how should it be distributed, or to whom should it be distributed. Those are the three central problems that everything in economics is trying to answer. So what do I mean when I say what should we produce? I'm saying that because we have the land, we have the sea, we have the trees, we have the gold, we have the labor, we have the entrepreneurial skills, and we have the capital. What are we going to decide to do? Are we going to manufacture cars? Are we going to farm and create rice, right? Are we going to create jewelry as a country? What are we going to produce? So that is the first question that we want to understand. What do we want to produce? What is important to us as people that we want to produce? Then the next question becomes, how do we produce it? We've decided that we want to produce cell phones, and we want to produce books, and we want to produce food. But how then do we produce it? How do we mix? Because remember, for example, in a farm, you can have a farm where you just have land and labor. And it's a farm. It can work like that, land, labor, and it's a farm. But in certain farms, you are going to have a lot of capital and a small piece of land. But there is a lot of machinery, they're doing all these different things, and etc. They've got irrigation, and etc. So that is the question of how do we mix around the resources that we have so that we can what? So that we can produce what we decided to produce. Then once we have the wheat, once we have the cell phones, once we have the vehicles, to whom do we give them? How do we distribute them? Do we say stand in a line, you have one phone, you have two phones, you have three phones, rationing, or do we use prizes? Do we say that whoever has the highest amount of money, they should be the ones that should be consuming? If you don't have money, then you should not be consuming. How do we distribute? So based on these three economic problems, therefore, all the systems that we see in the world are based on those three things. So you will notice that if you go to the West, in the Western countries like Europe, America, and etc., they've adopted a market system. A market system where is basically where they're saying that the three questions of economics are going to be answered through a market economy. We are going to decide what to produce based on what people are actually buying on the market. So we're going to look at the market and say, what are people buying? What are people demanding? That is what we are going to produce. We're going to decide how to produce based on what will give us the best profit as companies. So if we try a process and it has got a lot of costs, doesn't give us profit, we'll abandon it until we get the process where we get at least the cheapest product at what and sell it at the most expensive price. So the process of production is going to be decided by what? By costing, right? So that's again market system. And then lastly, we're going to decide how to distribute based again on the market. Whoever has the highest amount of money is the person that we're going to give the product to, right? As what? As companies. So that's in the West. Then if you go in the East, of course, it has changed nowadays, but in the past, if you go in the East countries like Russia and China, they were using a what? They were using what we call a command economy. A command economy is you sit once a year as the government and you decide that next year we are going to produce 1,000 cars, we're going to produce 10,000 bushels of wheat, and etc. And then once you have decided that, you sit down again and decide how are we going to produce it, regardless of whether it's profitable or it's not profitable. And then once you've done that, you are going to come up with a rationing system where you are saying that the people that are above 5 years are the ones that are going to get a car. The people above 4 years are the ones going to get it, etc. So that's the command system, right? And then the other countries in the middle, like us in Africa, etc., we chose a mixture of what we call the command and the what in the market system, which is called the mixed system. But basically, if you look at most economies today, they are actually now mixed. Most of them, they're actually now mixed. Yes. So that's how most countries are answering those specific questions. Right. Now, because I've highlighted to you the broad spectrum of this, then economists then go and study each individual market. The main market that is studied is actually the market economy. The other, the command, of course, studied here and there, but there's not much deep information because people have seen that it failed over time, so they are no longer interested in it. But the main economy that is studied is the market economy. Now, when you're studying the market economy, you start wanting to understand the various elements of the what? Of the market economy. For example, you want to understand what is the law of demand and what is the law of supply. What do I mean by that? I'm saying what determines how people demand a specific product. Is it the price of the product? Is it the income of the specific individual, and etc.? And then you look at the law of supply. What determines how companies supply products on the market? Is it the price of the product? Is it the technology that exists? Is it the availability of the resources? So all of those different things are the various aspects that you're going to study under the law of what? Under the law of demand and supply. Then you go a step further, you study the law of production, right? And production, in cost of production, where you want to understand what we call the marginal cost of production. What is the extra cost if I produce one extra unit of a specific item? right? And then you want to, what are the variable costs, what are the fixed costs, some of the accounting concepts that are underlined in what? In economics. And then after that, you start the market itself, right? What are the different markets that operate? For example, you can say there's a monopoly like ESCOM, right? Where it's only a company that is supplying electricity. Or you can say there's an oligopoly like the banking industry, where there may be only 4 or 5 banks that are supplying banking services. Or maybe it's a monopolistic monopolistic market like the clothing retail industry, where there are a lot of them that are there, but each and every one of them is a bit different than the other one. Or maybe it's a perfectly competitive market like in agriculture, where there are a lot of different farmers, but all they are selling, the product that they're selling, they are all similar. So those are the various aspects that we discuss under what we call microeconomics. Sorry, I'm just giving you a very broad overview before we. So those are the concepts that you're going to study under microeconomics. Now, the reason why you study these concepts is now when you come to managerial economics now, then now you need to know some of the nitty-gritties. For example, I was talking about the law of demand and supply, right? So under managerial economics, for example, you need to understand, right, as a manager, that what happens if I increase my price or if I decrease my price? We are trying to make a pricing decision. Should I increase my price? Should I decrease my price? So from the law of demand and supply, there is a concept, what we call elasticity of demand, right? That can tell you if you increase your price, you're going to lose customers. You are going to lose your revenue. But in another situation, it will tell you if you increase your price, you're actually going to gain more revenue, depending on the scenario that you are in. So that is the importance of learning these theories, or learning the type of market that you're operating under. Am I under monopoly? Am I under monopolistic competition? Am I under perfect competition? Am I under oligopoly? Because your behavior as a manager should be different depending on the market that you're operating under. So that is the reason why you need to understand the concept of microeconomics, i.e. the study of individual decision making. Then the second part of economics now is what we call macroeconomics. Macroeconomics now, we are no longer looking at individual decision making, but we are looking at the whole. We are looking at the broader aspect of the economy, which is actually much more relevant to the managerial economics that your lecturer likes. Lecturers are different. I know SBS lecturer, they like managerial economics for micro. They will do a lot of calculations, but your lecturer likes the other part, which is macro. Right? So when you're looking at macroeconomics now, you're looking at basically what we call the 5 macroeconomic objectives of a government. For example, the objectives are: we want to ensure that there is economic growth within a country. We want to ensure that there is price stability within a country. We want to ensure that there is a low unemployment, or there is a good level of employment in the country. We want to ensure that there is equitable distribution of wealth or of income in the country. And lastly, we want to ensure that there is a balance of payment stability in a country. So those are the 5 macroeconomic objectives. And basically, that's what you're studying when you're studying macroeconomics now. You're basically asking yourself questions about the government and the decisions that the government is going to make regarding the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, which affect those 5 macroeconomic objectives. So if the government makes this decision in its annual budget, how is it going to affect the economy? How is it going to affect me as a company? If the government, through the central bank, through the South African Reserve Bank, makes a specific decision, how is it going to affect the money supply in the country? How is it going to affect inflation? How is it going to affect my pricing and the taxes that I'm going to pay? And then you're also looking at issues of economic development, right? The decision making that the government makes and how it influences economic development within a specific country. So that's from a broad perspective. That's what economics is all about. But this is very, very broad. I've left out a lot of different things. But that's a broad perspective of what economics is all about. So I would encourage you to just go through some of the areas. Then whenever you have challenges, we can talk about the specific topic that you want to talk about. But for the purposes of what we want to do here, we want to focus on the assignments. So I will limit whatever we discuss to what has been asked by the lecturer. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So managerial economics. So in this particular situation, we have a case study. Have you read the case study?
Yes, I've read through it.
Okay. So we've got question 1, 2, 3, 4 from the case study. Okay. Question number 1 says, given the transitory nature of the shock, a good option might be hibernation. That is slowing the economy until the pandemic is brought under control, while using fiscal policy to compensate for some of the many losses that the economy needs to withstand. Critically discuss the activities that characterized firm hibernation as a result of the fallout of COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. So the answer that you're going to provide, it's mainly from the case study, but you also just need to have a basic understanding of what we want to talk about. Okay. So the theoretical aspect of this question is what we call the business cycle. The business cycle. That's the theoretical aspect of what? Of this question. Just hold on. Okay, where is my... Okay. So when you're looking at the business cycle, right, you're saying that if you're going to draw, right, the activities in an economy, right, over a graph, you're going to have time on the what? On the x-axis, right? And here you're going to have GDP, right? Or the output of the economy on the what? On the y-axis, right? Like this, right? So over time, this is what is going to happen, right? GDP is going to increase, and then it's going to peak and then decline, and then increase, peak, and then decline, and then increase, peak, and then decline. And this is known as the business cycle, right? So peak, I'm just saying it's at a high point. These are the high points. Right? And then decline is where it's going down. And then here at the low point, if you ever hear in news, they're saying we're in a recession or in a depression, these are the low points over here. Where that's what they are highlighting. That's what they're talking about, right? So essentially, when you're talking about hibernation, right, as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, you're saying that the economy was on an upward trajectory, right? And then because of the pandemic, things started to what? Started to die down. The economy started to what? To slow down. It started to go into what? Into decline, right? It started to go into decline. Now, as the economy goes into decline, it means that the demand for goods and services is going to go down. This is now this theory behind that. We were talking about what we call the aggregate demand and etc. But basically, the demand for goods and services is going to go down. Now, when the demand of goods and services go down, the companies that are supplying those goods and services no longer have customers or have fewer customers. And when they have fewer customers, it means that they sell less, they make less profits. And when they make these less profits, some of them might end up having to close down because they are now making what? They are now making losses. So in order for these companies to survive, right? They go through a hibernation process. A hibernation process seems just like a bear goes through hibernation. You are stocking up, you are reserving your energy for when things are better, for when you get out of the winter or when you get out of the recession or of the depression. So basically, you're going to talk about the process of the slowing down of the economy, and then what are the activities that characterize that specific process, that characterize the slowing down of the economy, that characterize a recession or depression. What firm activities will you find in that specific area of the business cycle? So that's basically where the theory part is. The theory is the business cycle, and you're trying to answer what activities will you find in that specific part of the business cycle, which is the declining stage or the slowing down stage of the what? Of the economy. Okay.
Okay.
All right. See that. All right. So let's try to answer it. So what you're basically going to do, just give me a second.
Okay.
What you're basically going to do is, of course, like any question, you're going to need an introduction, right? But because it's 15 marks, don't get overexcited, just a simple introduction, right? What are you going to put in your introduction? You're going to highlight, right, that in each and every economy, right, there is a business cycle. And within the business cycle, we find that the economy has got different stages that it goes to. So the stages are, you highlight what the stages are, the peak, the decline, the recession, and the expansion. Those are the 4 stages of what? Of a business cycle. So you are highlighting that there are 4 stages of the what? Of the business cycle. And we can note that from the case study that this economy is in what? Is in decline, right? It is gone beyond and it is in decline. And there are certain activities that are found within the what? Within the decline stage of a what? Of a business cycle. Therefore, this essay, the purpose of this essay is to discuss and highlight the activities of the firm as they are found under the what? Under the decline stage of a what? Of a business cycle, right? So one of the activities that you will find is that some firms will shut down completely. Some firms will shut down. So that's maybe your starting point, that because of the pandemic, because of the lockdown, because of the slowing economy, some firms will not be able to sell their products and services. So therefore, it will be necessary for them to shut down. Now, you can add a bit of theory if you want and highlight that the firms that are mainly going to shut down are the firms whose, whose prices for the products are below the average variable cost. Now, that's a theoretical aspect. It's not necessary to put it in there, but you can actually put it in there because it shows you the understanding what economics is all about. So the firms that are going to shut down are the firms whose price for the product is lower than the average variable cost within that within that short run. So because costs are increasing, demand is declining, some firms will find themselves in a situation where they need to shut down. Then another activity that you will find is that the other firms may not shut down, right? They may adapt, right? They may change their tactics of operations, right? Some of them might further differentiate their products so that they don't lose their customers to cheaper versions of the product. Some of the companies will reduce their costs. They will find alternative ways of production, i.e., in terms of how to produce. They will change the mixture of their resources in such a manner so as to reduce the extra cost of production, so as to increase their their profitability. So that's what other firms are going to do. So it's basically that you find that there will be changes in the industry in terms of how companies are operating as a way to either reduce the costs of production or differentiate their products in a way so as to protect their market share from competitors. So that's a second activity that you will find within the what? Within the economy. Another activity that you might find is renegotiation of contracts. Now, in terms of renegotiation of contracts, what are we saying? We're saying that given that the demand and supply, right, has been affected by the recession. For example, if you're looking at demand, there is lower demand because of what? Because of the recession, right? Because of that lower demand, a firm cannot continue producing at the same level it was producing. Therefore, if it had permanent employees that it was employing, it needs to lower its labor, because it no longer needs the labor. So it will either fire some employees or it will renegotiate the contracts with the what? With the employees. Or, for example, another example is if they want to maintain the same amount of sales that they were doing, they could instead renegotiate the cost of production. They can renegotiate contracts with suppliers in terms of the prices that they were paying for the what? For the raw materials, so as to reduce their cost of production and maintain the current supply that they have, that they are putting into the market. So that's another thing that you can also notice that will happen in the what? That will happen in the market. Then another thing that you notice within the recession is that firms can increase their borrowing within the recession because there are lower cash flows coming from what? Coming from sales. The firms can choose an alternative where they borrow from financial institutions to cover any current shortfalls in liquidity so that they can finance maybe their wages, maybe their salaries, or maybe their fixed costs in the short run. So you can see that firms can start borrowing money on the existing contracts that they already have. So that's another thing that you also find in the market. So those are examples of things that you can talk about and discuss for question number 1. Do you have any questions there?
Okay, Jane, so then, for example, when a question is 15 marks like this, like how much should I write, or how many PowerPoints should I put?
Okay, what I would advise you is take a calculator, right? The number of words for your assignment is on average, let's say 5.5 or 5,000, because the minimum number of words usually is 5,000, right? Calculator, 5,000, right?
Yes.
Then you divide that by 100, because your assignment is out of 100 marks, right? That gives you 50. Yes. Then you multiply 50 by the number of marks in the assignment. Right? For example, it's 15 marks, so it becomes 15 multiplied by 50. It gives you 750 words. So you can just take your word count. So if you get to 750 words, then you know you're fine for that question. 750 words, it's more like 1 page, around 1 page. It's around 1 page to 1.5. I think if you go to 1.5, you actually be a bit, around 1 page to 1.5 pages for that 50 marks. But in exact terms, it's 750 words. That's exactly what you need to write. 750.
Okay.
Yes. Then my advice again, make sure you have got introduction, you've got a body where you put in your subheadings, and you've got a conclusion. Your lecturers are very interested in making sure you have to have a proper structure in any essay.
Okay.
An introduction, a body with subheadings, and a conclusion. Then don't do things in point form. Like when you say dash or you put bullet points, don't do that. When you're answering assignments at postgrad level, you write in essay format. You put a subheading, if you want to bullet, you put a subheading, then under the subheading, you explain your point in a paragraph. You put the next subheading, you explain your point in a paragraph. Don't put bullet points. Lecturers hate that very much.
Okay.
So that's number 1.
So then for each question, it needs to have the intro, body, conclusion.
Yes. Because the way your assignments are structured, most of them, they are different. I know there are lecturers who want an introduction at the beginning, then you answer all the assignment questions, and then a conclusion at the end. But for your assignments, different, because most of the questions are uniquely different. So you will just have intro, board conclusion on each and every question, as long as it is 15 marks and above. If it is 10 marks going down, it's fine, you can ignore. But if it's 15 marks and above, just put intro. It's just one paragraph. Intro, one paragraph. Conclusion, one paragraph. And then you put your body, maybe one page or something like that. Okay. Then you go to question number 2. Unlike the previous crisis, COVID-19 originated outside the financial sector, impacting on the corporate sector in a number of ways. Citing examples from this case study, critically discuss how the pandemic affected resilience of the corporate sector. Now, this question is not really an economics directed question. It's just a very, very basic question. So it really doesn't have much to do with economic theory, right?
Okay.
That's the benefit of this one. It doesn't really have much. It just depends with your understanding of the pandemic and how it has affected different people in the corporate sector. Right. So my advice is that you can look at, again, you put in your introduction, then you put in your body, and then you put in your conclusion, and then 15 marks, 750 words. But in terms of what you're going to talk about, the first thing is how is it affecting the resilience of the corporate sector, is you need to go back to your demand and supply. You can separate it as how it affected demand factors and how it affected supply factors, right? So maybe that's your theoretical aspect of it. Then in terms of your demand factors, you're saying that the COVID-19 pandemic, right, resulted in what? For example, it resulted in job losses. That's what it resulted in. And because it resulted in job losses, there was less demand because people had less what? Had less income, right? So the job losses equals to less demand equals to less sales for the what? For the companies. Remember, you need to tie it back to the corporate sector. Right? That's what we're wanting.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the revenues of the companies was what? Declined during the what? The pandemic. Therefore, their resilience was negatively what? Was negatively impacted. Because for the companies to survive, for the companies to be resistant, they need revenue, they need sales. But this was negatively impacted by the what? By the pandemic through the job losses that happened in the market, which resulted in lower aggregate demand for the what? For their products and their what? And their services, right? Then another thing that you can also highlight is that if a company was enjoying profitability, right, before the pandemic, now as a result of the pandemic, you're saying that there is a decline in what? In demand, right? There's some different, should we include the graph for this one? But anyway, I'll explain. There is a decline in what? In demand. And that decline in demand can result in what? In losses happening in the company. So instead of just the revenues going down, the company can eventually suffer losses. So, okay, let's see. Let me draw something over here. So in economics, there are these graphs when you're looking at what you call a perfectly competitive firm. I'm sorry if some of the graphs end up confusing you. It's difficult to squeeze it in, because if I try to slow down, it's going to take us a lot of time.
Yeah. So then here you're explaining if a company was making good profits, basically.
Yes, if a company was making good profits. We call them economic profits in economics, right?
Okay.
So, right, that's what I'm drawing. I'm trying to draw a graph here for what you call economic profits. If you check in your, I think if you need to study module, it should be there. Okay. So this is your supply curve. This is your demand curve. And this is your price over here. So this is where supply and demand meet. And because this is where supply and demand meet, this is where you as a company are going to produce. So this is going to be what we call your AR curve, AR or MR curve. And then this is what you call your MC, which is your marginal cost curve. Right. So when you are producing as a company, for you to make profit, you produce where we say MC is equals to MR, which is here. MC is equals to MR, which means this is the output that you're going to what? To provide as a company for you to make the maximum amount of profit possible. Right. Then this is your average cost curve, which is the cost that you're facing as a company. So if this is your price over here, right, and this is your cost over here, you can see that you're making a profit. Why do I say so? Because I'm saying at Q1 over here, Q1, right, the cost is going to be here.
Wait, James, sorry. Can you please explain the second graph again?
All right, it's fine. So the first graph, we said this is demand and supply,
yes,
right, for the market. For the market. So this is your demand curve for the market, this is your supply curve for the market, and this is the price for the market. Then the second graph is for one company, the graph for the company. So for the company, we're saying that the company has a price at which it sells its product. Now, under perfect competition, you can take the price from the market. This is why here P over here is here over here, right? So this is also P over here. So we are taking the price from the market. We cannot change the price. We take the price exactly as it is from the market. Then in terms of how much quantity do we produce as a company? We are going to say that our marginal cost curve. So there's a lot of theory concerning marginal cost. But marginal cost basically means the extra cost. So we're saying that the extra cost that we're going to incur to produce one extra cell phone, for example, right? That's marginal cost. And then MR is marginal revenue, the extra revenue that we're going to get from producing one extra cell phone. So for us to maximize profit, the extra cost and the extra revenue should equal. That's how we maximize profit. So a firm is going to produce where MC is equal to MR, which is over here, which is Q1, which is the quantity. Q1 simply means the quantity. Maybe it's 100 units or 1,000 units of the cell phones that we're producing. Right? So we're saying that Q1 or maybe 1,000 is the quantity that will maximize the profit for the what? For the company, given the price in the what? In the market. And therefore, we now want to calculate what profit is the company making. So if you want to know the profit, we go to the costs. AC, average cost, represents the cost. So we go up from our quantity over here, we go here to the cost curve, right? And then we go to the x-axis, the y-axis over here, right? And then we can see that there is a gap between the price P over here and the cost over here, which is this shaded area over here, right? So this shaded area represents the profits, the good profits that I was talking about, what we call economic profits. That the firm was what? That the firm was enjoying. So these good economic profits, we are now saying that if demand is going to go down, right? In the COVID-19 pandemic, right? We are going to get a new demand curve. If demand goes down, it goes to the what? To the left, right? So let's say there is now a new demand curve, for example.
Oh yeah, then it goes down like this. Okay, I see.
So we now have demand curve here,
going down.
2. So this is our new demand curve. So where is our new price? Price is demand is equals to supply. That's how we get price. So our new demand curve and the old supply curve, we have got here.
They meet the
price. And remember what we said about the company. The company takes the price from the market, which means that the new price, if we put our dash over here, it's now over here. This is the new price. So we got which represents our what? Our MR and our AR.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yes.
at this new price, again, profit maximization does not change. MR is cost MC. So MR is cost MC. So we're going to produce over here. You can see that the quantity that we're going to produce is declined. That's the
Declined.
The quantity is what? Is declined.
Declined.
That's Q2. So this is what we meant when we said that the revenue of the business is going to go down. Why? Because the quantity that they can sell is going to what? Is going to go down. So that's point number one that we talked about, right? And then point number two, which I was trying to introduce, is the loss that the company is going to make. Now remember, they were making a profit before. Now let's check again. At Q2, what is the cost? So we go up until we go to AC. Where is AC? You can see AC is up over there, right? So we go again to the cost, right? And you see the cost has not changed. The cost is still the same, but the price is now under the cost. Do you see that?
Yeah.
The price is now under the cost, which means that they are going to make this loss over here. Oh, so that's the what? That's the second point that you are going to want to highlight. So we say the first point is that there's going to be a decline in sales. Why? Because they can no longer sell more. Then the second point is after that decline in sales, based on economic theory, right? We're saying that they can no longer enjoy economic profits or abnormal profits in the what? In the recession. They are likely going to suffer some losses within the what? Within the recession. So that is going to affect their resilience as businesses, because losses means negative cash flows for the what? For the business. Losses means what? Negative cash flows for the business. So they cannot continue operating with what? With losses. Which brings us to point number three, right? Point number three, we're saying that in addition to the losses that they are suffering as a business, which means they are not making profit, right? They have negative cash flow. Negative cash flow affects what we call the working capital of the company. The working capital, what do we mean by working capital? We are saying that for you to operate on a daily basis, you need to pay your salaries, you need to pay your suppliers, right? You need to pay your bills as a company. So if you are having losses, it means that the cash inflows are less than the cash outflows, which means that you are going to run out of the bank account cash that you have in the what? In the bank account at a certain point in time. So if you start with 100 million in the bank account in January, maybe by June you end up with zero, although you had money at the what? At the beginning, because you are using that money to cover the losses that you are suffering as a what? As a business. So our third point, therefore, is that it's going to negatively affect their working capital or their ability to finance their operations, which brings us to what we discussed under hibernation, which is shutdown, which is again resilience. Again, we're saying that it has negatively affected the ability of the business to withstand the what? The recession. Why? Because it has negative cash flows, and those negative cash flows are negatively affecting the working capital needs of that what? Of that specific business. Okay. What else can we talk about? All right, maybe we can also talk about what we call contagion. We're now at point number 4, contagion. We can also talk about contagion. Contagion, we're basically saying that you as a business, for you to operate, you are dependent on other businesses, right? It's more like the same point, the first point that we talked about, where we highlighted the employees getting, people losing their jobs, and that negative the company. So if other businesses close down, it can also negatively affect the company. That is contagion. So for example, if business is closed down, right, it means that they can no longer put money in the banks, which means that the businesses of banks is also going to go down. Although the pandemic might not have necessarily affected the banks directly, indirectly, the banks will suffer contagion from the failure of their customers. So if your suppliers close down, it's going to what? To negatively affect you. If your customers close down, it's going to negatively affect you. If your competitors close down, it can also negatively affect you as a business. So that is what contagion is all about. We're basically saying that the closure of other businesses can negatively affect the resilience, right, of the other businesses. Why? Because these businesses might have been providing support, right, to these businesses in forms of services, in forms of supplies, in forms of raw materials, and etc. Or they may have been customers of that specific business. So that's another thing that you also notice, contagion, right? And then another thing, let's see. What else can we talk about? But I think we have enough points, at least 4 points. If you explain them, it should be enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
I can even add those graphs.
Yes, you can add. You can,
Okay.
you can definitely add those graphs. All right, we go to question number 3. COVID-19 crisis and the hibernation period have triggered extensive immediate policy responses from fiscal and monetary authorities across the world. 3.1. Using examples from the case study and in your country, discuss some of the fiscal responses or interventions that support small or SMEs within the corporate sector. So for this question, you're going to need an understanding of what a fiscal policy is or what a monetary policy is. So we are saying that when operating in an economy, the government can influence economic activity. They can influence economic growth. They can influence employment levels. They can influence price stability. There are those 5 macroeconomic objectives that I mentioned earlier. They can influence those things through policy, through government policy. Now, government policy is split mainly into 3 things. There's fiscal policy, there's monetary policy, and then there's legislation, right? We, in economics, we usually ignore legislation because it has nothing to do with that one. But those are the 3 policies that we talk about when we're talking about government. So mainly fiscal and monetary policy, that's what we talk about in economics. So monetary policy, under the current conditions, is usually not considered a government policy, but it is a government policy. Why? Because over time, there is what we call a central bank, or the South African Reserve Bank, the bank in the country that is responsible for printing money, or that is responsible for managing the money supply in the economy. In the past, that bank was under the government, or it was controlled by the government. But in today's economies, most central banks are independent. They are not controlled by the government. Although they work in tandem with the government, they are not controlled by the government. So you will notice sometimes monetary policy might not necessarily be a government policy. We don't really talk about it that much, but you need to understand, because sometimes you have to include it in your discussion, because the government actually has influence on the monetary policy, because the governors and etc. and the ministries of finance actually sit down and discuss what are we going to do to save the what, to save the economy. Right. Then fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is made up of I think it's 2 things, 3 things. It's made up of 3 things. Right. Fiscal policy is government policy in terms of what are they going to spend. That's fiscal policy in short. But it's made up of 2 things. It's made up of, number 1, the budget, right, which stipulates where money is going to be spent. Right, the budget. Then number 2, taxation. Taxation stipulates how much are we going to get, right, from the what, from people. Then borrowing. Usually it's ignored, but it's also very important. It supplements taxation, because borrowing simply means that the government is saying that even if taxation is not enough, we are going to borrow money, right, to finance the budget, right? So monetary and fiscal policy, both of them, can either be expansionary or contractionary. So expansionary monetary fiscal policy, we're basically saying that the government is spending money or is encouraging the act of spending money in the economy with the desire to increase economic activity or with the desire to resuscitate economic activity. I'll give you an example. So if the government was to say we are going to build a new dam in Gauteng, right, and then take 2 billion rand and put it in the dam, that 2 billion rand means that there are going to be new jobs created. There are going to be suppliers for cement. There are going to be suppliers for steel and etc. They have stimulated economic activity, because the new jobs created means that those new people can now go to the shops to pick and pay and buy goods and services. Right? So that has stimulated the economy, that has increased economic growth. So that's an expansionary monetary policy. So another example of expansionary is reducing taxes. So if you were paying 20% taxes and the government says this year you're going to pay 19% in taxes, which means that you have 1% extra income from last year, which you can spend in the shop. So that's another example of expansionary monetary fiscal policy. Right. Then if you go to the monetary policy side, when we say expansionary monetary policy, we're simply saying either the Reserve Bank is printing more money, they're going and printing more rands so that people can actually hold more rands, or they are reducing the interest rates. If they reduce the interest rates, it means that you can borrow more money because it's cheaper. For example, if they tell you that the interest rate is 20% and they tell you that the interest rate is 1%, you are likely to borrow more money under 1% than under 20%. So if the interest rate is declining, you are going to borrow more money. If you borrow more money, where are you going to use that money? You're going to what? To buy things. So that's expansionary monetary policy. So there's the opposite, which is the contractionary fiscal policy and contractionary monetary policy. But for the purposes of this, we're looking at the expansionary part of the fiscal policy, because that's what they did. So using examples from the case study in your country, discuss some of the fiscal policy responses and interventions in support of SMEs. So be careful, it's looking for those in support of what? Of SMEs. So your example should be aligned to SMEs, not everything that they did. So if you look at our government, for example, what they did during the okay, sorry, just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. Let's see. Monetary policy, fiscal policy 2021 and 2020. Government of South Africa. What did the government do? All right, yeah, got them. Let's try to get actual examples.
Excuse me.
No, I'm trying to get you some real life examples. I don't want to just highlight these. I want to talk about actual examples of what the government did. Okay, let's see. So please don't copy and paste what I'm showing you right now. It's for someone else, but I just wanted to make sure that you've got real life examples.
Okay.
Okay. Plus, you can also see the structure in terms of how you structure your work.
Yes.
What?
But then is it necessary to write body, or I just?
No, it's not necessary. It's just the person who was writing. The style of the person who was writing. The necessary is the subheadings. What about the subheading? What about the body? Just that some people do different things. We don't correct them.
Yeah.
We also want the work to be unique so that the lecturer doesn't think that you are copying from each other. So
okay.
Funny things right there. But you can see introduction, right? And then under the body, policy options to face the COVID-19 pandemic, right? I think this is not important. I think it was just waffling there. Right, yeah, here we go. Other fiscal policy responses and interventions. So you can see here, example number one, there was the debt relief fund offered to what? To SMEs. So if you check online, you actually find that there's actually a debt relief fund that was given by the government for SMEs. So
yeah, I remember that.
So the debt relief fund simply means that if a company is in debt, it can go and borrow some money to pay off its debtors or something like that. So that's an expansionary fiscal policy that they implemented that allows the businesses to continue operating. and that allows the businesses to what? To continue selling. That allows the businesses to continue producing. That allows the businesses to continue employing people. Because if these businesses don't employ people, then the economy is going to shrink further. So that's an example that you can that you can use. And then again, the business growth and resilience facility. That's another example. If you go online again, you'll find this another SME example that was implemented by South Africa. Then you have the, what was this one? Let's see, primary goal. This one I don't know it, but I'm sure if you check online, you'll find it.
Yeah.
This one also tax subsidies. So remember, we said that there is money that the government spends, right? And then there is money that the government that the government taxes, right? So you have talked about the spending side where they created the debt relief fund and etc. Now on the tax side, the subsidies that the government employed, where they were saying that you can either defer paying your taxes for 6 months or so, or if you are employing people, I think it was per employee, there was a tax subsidy that you could that the government said, instead of you paying us this specific amount of tax, we'll pay the 500 rand for you as the government for that tax, which means that they essentially you've put 500 rand for each employee that if you have 100 employees, it means that every month you're essentially getting 5,000 rand from the government as a subsidy. To continue operating is a tax subsidy. So that's on the tax side. That's an example on the tax side. Or the other one that I was talking about, deferring paying your taxes. That's another example on the tax side, right? There it is, you put it there, deferral of tax payments. So those are some of the examples that you can put in. Then in addition to that, you can also talk about the debt. Remember, I said that there are three things: government spending, taxation, and debt. Now, for the government to finance these things, they did not use tax revenue because tax revenue was lower. They actually borrowed money. I don't really remember who they borrowed. Was it IMF or World Bank? I don't really remember. But the government actually borrowed money for them to be able to finance some of these activities. So you can also go online and research where the government borrowed their money from. So you can highlight those three major points, right, in terms of the fiscal policy. All you're saying is that the government implemented an expansionary fiscal policy to facilitate the expansion of the economy by directing funds to SMEs. There were three major areas, right? The government spending area, and you highlight the different debt relief funds and etc. that they did. The taxation area, you highlight the tax subsidies and the deferral of the taxes. And then the borrowing area, you highlight how much the government borrowed to finance some of these activities. Then you are done with your question 3.1. So I think for today, I think we are done with 1 hour.
Yes. And it went by so fast.
Yeah, of course. It goes by very, very fast. Okay.
It did.
So,
okay. I think, can we do another hour tomorrow to finish it up?
What time? Because tomorrow my challenge is I have lectures in the evening that I need to prepare for. So from 2 in the afternoon going up, I won't be available unless if we are doing it before 2.
Okay, we can do exactly at 1 o'clock.
All right, that's fine. That's fine.
Is that fine?
Yeah, that's fine. Just remind me. I tend to forget sometimes.
Okay, I definitely will. I definitely will remind you. So we can do it at 1 o'clock.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it now.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers, bye.
Bye-bye.